Welcome to Straight Talk. Farmers pride themselves that they can take the knocks, but our Canterbury colleagues have been dealt a king hit by the massive earthquake. Grain silos have spilled their contents, paddocks are in upheaval, and water and electricity supplies have been cut. How do farmers begin to repair the devastation? Meanwhile, the Wool Industry Task Force has a new chairman, Colin Harvey, the founder of Ancare. It's make or break time for this once great industry. And the fallout continues over the South Canterbury Finance receivership. Which lenders will step back in to help farmers now? Today I'm joined by National Business Review journalist Liam Baldwin and former Federated Farmers Vice President Keith Hanning. Now Keith, you used to farm not a million miles away from where the earthquake struck. You've been talking to a few of your colleagues from down there. How are they faring?
Well, they've done very well really, and I think farmers have really pitched in together. I heard on the TV the other night one cowshed was kept going 24 hours a day to milk 22,000 cows at the start of the emergency. Farmers tend to work together and get together as communities when these things happen. I heard also that the 40 grain silos that were destroyed, the grain that had come out had already been picked up and stored in other places. So they've moved very quickly, but one can feel for them with you know, at the height of calving, getting into milking and all that, and some of the sheds have gone off their rotary situations.
That's right, which is a big thing. I guess there's a lot more damage that farmers will come across just as they go about their daily farming activities. Well,
this is one of the problems. For example, if you've got an artesian bore, will your well work if you've got power to it when the irrigation season comes on in 6 weeks? Has the ground shifted enough to stop the bore working? All these issues are faced. Fence lines have moved in places, although one hears that stock was kept in the same places, so that was great. Yeah,
but I guess there's a lot of issues too with getting pivots set up again for irrigation and so forth, with some of those paddocks that were absolutely flat and now they're humped and hollowed.
Moved,
yeah. Liam, how do you think emergency services have coped, particularly out in the rural areas? It seems, as Keith says, that most immediate needs have been pretty well attended to.
Yeah, well, dairy in particular jumped on the game pretty quickly because they had to. The cows had to be milked, and everyone rallied around, as Keith said. But more importantly, there's going to be those long-term problems like with water, like with boundary shifts, pasture damage, and just making sure that production is going to be maintained. But importantly, the grain issue was a big one. I don't think anyone really saw that one happening, and of course I think it's more than 50 silos that have fallen over, and most of this was food grade grains, wheat that couldn't be just picked up with front-end loaders. They needed to be sucked up to preserve its integrity and stored, and it's just been tremendous that it all happened before the rain fell initially, and then again dealing with the ones that...
was safe, Is there likely to be a bit of a run on other feed supplies, Keith, because of farmers being worried about a shortfall there, or not necessarily?
I think the rainfalls have been good, so if the warmer weather prevails, and it obviously, hopefully not too many storms come through, they might get through this season all right early, and then the question of storage and so on comes up later on.
Right, okay. And Liam, what about Federated Farmers' response? They've been very much on the front foot, haven't they?
They have. They mobilised pretty quickly in Wellington, and they got their staff on the ground, but also more importantly their members rallying around. Offers of help from members started flooding into the Wellington HQ, but then you also had the various leaders of the various sections, and particularly in North Canterbury, going around. Even when they were trying to assess the damage on their own properties, they were working with others and trying to facilitate issues. I mean, one issue was hauling equipment around from farm to farm to help neighbours out, but the vehicles normally used to haul this equipment were just farm vehicles, and they weren't registered, so they were trying to work with the police to make sure that nobody was going to get ticketed for driving on the road.
Yeah, which is great. That's a really good show of community initiative there, isn't it, in that way. Keith, do you think there'll be any suggestion that, as with business owners in Christchurch receiving a government payment, that there might be something like that lined up for the rural sector? Is there a need there for roll?
I haven't heard it yet. Well, if the dairy farmers get milking and so on immediately, the great thing about being a dairy farmer is your checks come in regularly. Wool farmers, it's a long time, and they're really suffering already with the low prices and so on, and those issues have to be dealt for the long term.
What about those farmers who mightn't have had insurance? I mean, most farmers generally would be pretty well insured, but for those who haven't, what could be done there?
I'd be surprised that most farmers don't have some insurance anyway, because I think if you've got a mortgage, your mortgagee demands that you take out insurance on.
Right. And Liam, what about issues moving further forward? A lot of talk about water in the Canterbury area. There's been quite a lot of disruption there in terms of flows and, as Keith was saying before, irrigation systems. Do you think there's going to be a larger scale sort of rethink of what goes on, particularly with the Land and Water Forum's report imminent?
I don't think it's going to change anything with the big picture. There's going to be some issues that develop over the next few weeks, as Keith alluded to. There will be wells that aren't working. I mean, I think there's reports already flowing in, and these things are expensive to put in the ground, $100,000 plus regulatory costs. If they're not working, it's unlikely that a well would be insured, and so a farmer is looking at doing that all over again. And there's conversely, in other areas which have been a bit drier, the groundwater's come up and it's damaging pasture and causing problems there. So that's got to have to be sorted out.
So there's a lot to be attended to further down the track. Right.
I think there's the other side of what's happened to people, and that is long term rather than short term. And with the continuing smaller quakes, I mean, one hears today on the radio 50% increase in violence and family violence in the last few days from the police because of people so upset and so on. So
and just not knowing
pressure.
What's going to happen from here on. That stress about things. Right. Okay. Well, moving on to the wool industry, Colin Harvey has stepped up to take over as chairman of the wool task force. Is this a bit of a hospital pass, do you think, Liam?
I don't think so. I mean, it needed somebody independent, and that was vital. If they put one of the old school faces in there, I think they'd be
you agree with that, Keith?
Entirely, because I was involved in the battle over whether we have acquisition early on and so on. So it's gone on and on for too long.
Yes. So you
and
think
the good thing about Colin Harvey is he's had a very good businessman, and he's had a dairying background rather than a wool and meat background, and that may be a big positive.
So he'll come in without some of that baggage that perhaps long-term players in the wool industry have had, Liam?
He won't have the baggage, but I guess the true test will be how susceptible he is to influence. He will be. I mean, there's going to be a lot of groups trying to get their oar in and make sure that they're heard and what they want is high on the agenda for discussion. How this plays out is anyone's guess. It's going to require some pretty tough management and a pretty firm hand.
Right, but David Carter has he's indicated fairly strongly that he wants to see action here, and he wants these people to really be doing the best for the wool industry. Is that likely to happen?
He can only do so much. I mean, that's his desire, that's what he wants. I think that's widely accepted that it needs to happen, but I mean, that's just a general comment. I mean, once we get into discussing what really needs to happen and how it's going to be funded and what the actual specific directions are going to be, then that's when the real contention's going to begin.
Has there been too much time wasted already, Keith? I mean, this task force was set up quite some months ago, wasn't it?
One of the problems was to get somebody. They've already approached two people, I understand at least, to do, and they felt it was a hospital pass. But thank God somebody's had the courage to take it on, I'd say. Come in
and do it. Good one. Now, moving on to an area of interest to wool growers, the meat sector report, which beef and lamb farmers are being asked for their comments on. This is a good step, Keith, in terms of getting back to the grassroots. Yeah, and that gives every farmer a chance to make a comment. Now, hopefully they listen to, but at least the people heading it up will know the overall feeling of farmers. I think that's very important if you want to win their confidence and as you go ahead. Yeah, right. Liam, do you think there might be some farmers out there who'll just go, look, we've done this a number of times before, nothing happened, why should we bother this time?
No, because I think there's genuine worry there, and I think they'd be likely to say we want more control over the meat, we want more ownership of the meat, and therefore more say in how it gets marketed, what is actually produced, and who are the markets that we target. I mean, they're pretty much out of the loop. The lamb leaves the land and that's it. They get a check.
We'll watch with interest. Yeah. After the break, we stir the ashes of South Canterbury finance and conjure up the future for all those affected investors who'll soon have a lot of money burning holes in their pockets. Stay with us. Welcome back to Straight Talk. Now it's on to You Said It, comment in the ag media, which we want to talk about further. Well, Liam, South Canterbury Finance, what hasn't been said about it? What's going to happen from here on?
Well, there is a lot of money that's going to be floating around, and I guess the major beneficiaries of it initially will be the trading banks as people sit down and try and work out what to do next. What we don't really know is where all this money is going to end up, and like specifically which region, even which country. But hopefully, a lot of it goes back to its roots. Yeah,
well, that would be what Timaru and Canterbury people would be hoping, wouldn't it, Keith?
Oh, definitely. And Alan Hubbard, it's tragic to see what's happened, but you know, he's a very respected figure over many generations almost in Canterbury in terms of helping young farmers onto the land. I've spoken at Lincoln College many years ago when it was a college, and with farmers on a basis of how they got into the farming industry with the help of a man like him and the different programs he had, and they become very big farmers, some of them. One gets a feeling that A, age, and B, the fact that he didn't have other people with him all the time, and C, that he went away from the basic knitting and came up to Auckland and hit a cropper, if you might say.
That's right.
It's very sad.
Because that's what always appealed to farmers, didn't it? That they saw him as a person who saw the value of the agricultural sector and wanted to keep investing there. Yeah. Liam, was it right that the government came in and did what it did? It didn't really have any choice in the end, did it?
No, there was no choice, and I mean it was unprecedented, really. I mean nobody really saw this coming a year ago, even though there were some rumblings, and just the fallout is just immense. I mean, couple this with the earthquake, the cost that Canterbury to New Zealand. I mean, it's a measurable part of New Zealand's GDP now. I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars, and nearly half of that is attributed to a finance company. It's just crazy.
Do you think the earthquake will take away some of the emphasis on what's happening with South Canterbury Finance? People who have bigger things to worry about.
Well, no. I think people are going to be focused on the task at hand with regards to the earthquake, but their finances, that's their long-term stuff. I mean, that's always going to be in the forefront of their mind. Right,
OK. Now, I noticed there's a story in the Sunday Star Times saying there's an authorised biography of Alan Hubbard due out in November. Do you think it'll hit the bestseller lists?
I think it's going to be interesting reading. I think it'd be interesting to find out if Alan Hubbard's going to be getting a cut of this, because he could be using some funds. Yeah. It's probably, it'll be interesting to see if it actually takes into account his style of management with South Canterbury Finance and just the methods that he used and his, I guess, his failure.